Disguised CEO catches manager harassing black waitress, his next move shocks everyone. The first thing Daniel Reed noticed wasn't the food. It was the silence. Not the peaceful, end-of-day quiet that settles over a restaurant after a long shift, but a heavy, suffocating silence. The kind that presses against your ears and makes you look up from your plate. Daniel sat alone at a corner table, dressed in faded jeans, a gray hoodie, and scuffed sneakers. His baseball cap was pulled low over his eyes. To anyone else, he looked like a tired traveler passing through Chicago on a rainy Thursday evening. But Daniel Reed wasn't just any customer. He was the CEO and founder of Reed Hospitality Group, one of the fastest-growing restaurant chains in the United States, with branches expanding into Toronto and London. And tonight, no one in this particular downtown location knew he was there. That was the point. He believed the only way to know your company was to see it when no one was performing for you. And what he was seeing now made his stomach turn. Near the kitchen entrance stood a young black waitress, slim, poised, maybe 22 or 23. Her name tag read, Maya. She held a tray close to her chest like a shield. Standing in front of her was Carl Whitman, the restaurant's regional manager. Daniel had hired Carl 2 years ago after an impressive interview filled with bold promises about discipline, efficiency, and keeping staff in line. Profits had gone up under his watch. But so had complaints. Daniel watched as Carl leaned in too close to Maya. I don't care how long you've been here, Carl snapped, his voice low but sharp. When I tell you to smile at customers, you smile. You don't stand around looking like you've got an attitude. Maya's jaw tightened. I was just waiting for table 12's order, sir. Don't talk back, Carl hissed. You're lucky you even have this job. Several staff members avoided eye contact. One busboy froze mid-step. A couple at table 7 shifted uncomfortably. Daniel's fingers tightened around his coffee mug. He had heard stories, anonymous emails, vague HR notes. But this was different. This was personal. Carl grabbed Maya's wrist. Not violently, but firmly enough to assert control. You think customers want to see that face? You think this is some charity? Maya pulled her hand back. Please don't touch me. Daniel stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush. He simply walked toward them, each step steady. Excuse me, he said calmly. Carl turned, irritation flashing across his face. Yes, we're handling a staff matter. Please return to your table. Daniel glanced at Maya. Her eyes met his for just a second. Wide, embarrassed, but strong. I couldn't help overhearing, Daniel continued. It sounded less like a staff matter and more like intimidation. Carl's lips curled. Sir, I manage this establishment. If you have a complaint, you can fill out a form online. Actually, Daniel said, pulling off his cap, I prefer handling complaints in person. Carl blinked. There was a flicker of recognition, but it hadn't landed yet. Daniel reached into his hoodie pocket and placed a small leather card holder on the counter. He slid out a business card and held it up between 2 fingers. Carl read the name. The color drained from his face. Daniel Reed, CEO. For a split second, the entire restaurant seemed to freeze. Maya's eyes widened. You, Carl stammered. Mr. Reed. I didn't know. That's the idea, Daniel replied quietly. He turned to Maya. How long have you worked here? 2 years, she answered, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. Have you ever been written up? No, sir. Daniel looked back at Carl. And yet you felt comfortable grabbing her arm and questioning whether she deserved her job. Carl swallowed. It's just performance standards. Daniel raised a hand. I built this company on one rule, he said, his voice firm but controlled. We treat people with dignity. Staff and customers alike. If profits rise but humanity falls, we've failed. The kitchen doors swung open, and a cook stepped out, eyes wide. Daniel scanned the room. Is this behavior common? Silence. Then, from behind the bar, a young man spoke. Yes, sir. Carl whipped around. Ethan, don't. Daniel warned softly. One by one, voices joined. He's always like that, especially with Maya. He cuts her shifts if she doesn't laugh at his jokes. The weight of truth filled the air. Maya stood still, her expression unreadable. Daniel exhaled slowly. Carl, he said, you're suspended effective immediately. HR will be reviewing your conduct. Carl's face hardened. You can't just. I can, Daniel replied. And I just did. Security, called discreetly by the hostess who had overheard, appeared at the entrance. Carl grabbed his jacket, shooting Maya a look of fury before storming out. The doors closed behind him, and the restaurant breathed again. Daniel turned to Maya. Are you okay? She nodded, though tears shimmered in her eyes. I didn't want to cause trouble. You didn't, Daniel said gently. You endured it. He gestured toward a booth. Would you sit with me for a moment? The staff stared as Maya hesitated, then nodded. They sat across from each other. Daniel studied her, not as an employee, but as a person. Tell me the truth, he said. Why didn't you report him? Maya let out a shaky laugh. I did, twice. Daniel's chest tightened. No one followed up. I got fewer hours after that, she admitted. My mom's in dialysis. I can't afford to lose this job. The words hit him like a punch. He thought of his own mother, how she'd worked double shifts in a diner in Detroit to pay his college tuition. How she'd come home exhausted but never complained. What's your mom's name? He asked. Angela. And what's your dream, Maya? She blinked, caught off guard. My dream. Yes. She looked down at her hands. I want to go back to school. Nursing. I had to drop out when my mom got sick. Daniel leaned back, silent for a long moment. Then he smiled softly. Finish your shift tonight, he said. Tomorrow, I'd like you to come to corporate headquarters. Her eyes widened. Am I in trouble? No, he said. You're being heard. The next morning, Maya walked into Reed Hospitality's glass tower downtown, her heart pounding. She wore her only blazer, thrifted, slightly big at the shoulders. Daniel met her personally in the lobby. In the boardroom, where executives usually discussed expansion deals, Daniel had something else prepared. A folder sat at her seat. Inside was a scholarship offer. Full tuition coverage for nursing school. Flexible scheduling at any Reed location. Health insurance benefits extended to her mother. Maya stared at the pages, unable to speak. This isn't charity, Daniel said quietly. It's investment. In someone who deserves better. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. You already did, he replied. By standing your ground. News of Carl's termination spread quickly. An internal investigation uncovered multiple complaints, most unaddressed. Daniel implemented anonymous reporting systems, mandatory leadership training, and a zero-tolerance harassment policy across all branches in the US, Canada, and the UK. But the biggest change wasn't policy. It was culture. Weeks later, Daniel returned, this time announced, to the Chicago location. The atmosphere felt lighter. Staff laughed freely. Maya worked behind the counter that day, radiant. When she saw him, she grinned. Future nurse Maya, he teased. She laughed. First semester starts Monday. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, stood with her father near the register, watching Maya with admiration. Daddy, the girl whispered loudly, I want to work here when I grow up. Maya knelt down to her level. You can work anywhere you want, she said gently. Don't let anyone tell you different. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Not pride, gratitude. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the Chicago skyline, Daniel sat alone again in the corner booth. This time, the silence felt different. It wasn't heavy, it was peaceful. Maya approached with a slice of pie. On the house, she said. I can't accept free food, he replied. She smiled. Then consider it a thank you, from my mom. He paused. How is she? Better, Maya said softly. She cried when I told her. She said there are still good people in this world. Daniel swallowed hard. He thought about the disguised visits he'd made over the years. The spreadsheets. The profit margins. None of it compared to this moment. As Maya walked away to serve another table, Daniel realized something simple but powerful. Leadership wasn't about authority. It was about protection. And sometimes, the most shocking move wasn't firing a manager. It was choosing to see someone who felt invisible, and reminding them they never were.